This is John Howell, Essential Cuts, your daily rundown of the best from today's show on 890 WLS.
Today, Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss as a special counsel in the investigation of Hunter Biden.
This appointment confirms my commitment to provide Mr. Weiss all the resources he requests. It also reaffirms that Mr. Weiss has the authority he needs to conduct a thorough investigation and to continue to take the steps he deems appropriate independently.
Apologies, that is Mr. Weiss.
Mr. Weiss has told Congress that he has been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including the responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges, and for making decisions necessary to preserve the integrity of any prosecution.
Well, this is Driving the News of the Day. Let's go to Andy Field, ABC News correspondent in D.C. Was this a big surprise today, Andy?
A little bit. I think it's been leading toward that for a while, especially since the plea bargain completely collapsed, which meant, there were some whistleblowers that were saying that the Delaware prosecutor, who was appointed by Donald Trump, did not have the power to pursue this in other jurisdictions. The special counsel designation gives him that power, even though the Justice Department had denied that was the case. I think they're trying to eliminate all doubt about this here. But, you go to law school and they teach this here. This is called not a great day for your client if you're representing Hunter Biden.
Well, the timetable now is open-ended, correct? There's not going to be a settlement next month or the month after that. This is going to go.
It doesn't appear to be. It will continue to be a political headache for President Biden, who Republicans, despite their very best efforts, cannot seem to take the stain of what Hunter Biden's done and his crimes that apparently he was going to plead guilty to, and others that were dropped that apparently he negotiated away. He's not going to be able to scrub that stain out. There's not enough Ajax or Drano or anything else to get that out of the political race this year, because Republicans are going to keep painting President Biden with his son. But yet they have yet to provide any evidence that Joe Biden, while he was president or vice president or even as a private citizen, got a dime from any of the money that Hunter Biden got from these business deals. It does seem apparent from testimony from, I think it was Archer, Devin Archer, who was one of Hunter Biden's associates, that, yes, his dad was on the phone a couple of times, but he made it very clear that he never heard Joe Biden talk business on those calls. It was just, hey, how are you doing, guys? Nice to see you.
I know, but we both know that Hunter Biden, he was peddling influence, and the fact that he'd get the vice president on the phone at that time, certainly that bolstered his resume, which was non-existent other than being Joe Biden's son, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's also no question that he was blowing a lot of hot air, saying, look what my dad can do for you. But the problem with the Republican investigations are they haven't been able to prove that his dad did anything for them.
Right.
They keep pointing to President Biden publicly saying they had to get rid of this prosecutor in Ukraine at some public event. The problem with that story is that the prosecutor was actually helping Burisma. That was the company that was working with Joe Biden.
Yeah,
with Hunter Biden.
Yeah, it's very convoluted, and it's tough to stick that landing if you're Republicans and you're trying to paint Joe Biden into this. But there's no doubt that kid has done his father absolutely no favors. Now, he's going to have a long process ahead of him now. Now that Weiss has been upped to special counsel, the Democrats must see a reemergence of the ghost of Ken Starr at this point. Because once you open that door, that investigation can lead anywhere that investigation is going to lead, which is exactly what the Republicans want. They probably really don't care what happens to Hunter Biden. They just want it to continue to percolate in the news through the election cycle.
Well, and they'd also like it to percolate on their terms, which is why Comer, who is the Republican in charge of the House Oversight Committee, is giving this a big sense of this of another sweetheart deal that the Justice Department is only doing this to stonewall his investigation and Republican congressional investigations into Hunter Biden. No indication that that's true, but they wanted to have these big show trials on the on the House and Senate floor or in these committees to basically do as much political damage to Joe Biden as possible. That is really what this is all about. There isn't a single Republican up there that could care about Hunter Biden, what he's doing or what he's done in the past. They care about it only in that how much does it make his father look bad.
So now this is just open-ended. Where does it go from here? Is there another shoe to drop next week, or is this kind of a stalemate at this point?
Well, certainly it's a stalemate in terms of any plea deal. But what it sounds like is that this special counsel is now going to start talking to other U.S. attorneys in California and in D.C. to say, let's take some of these charges and prosecute them locally at the federal level in those places. Now, Hunter Biden's attorneys come out and says, I'm not aware of any thing that Hunter Biden's done illegal in either one of those places. But I'm sure we'll soon find out if the new special counsel says that may be indeed the case.
Andy Field, thank you very much for the analysis this afternoon. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Take care.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
No arguing about this. I saw this on Channel 11. Our next guest produced the piece, and he's going to join us in just a second. Chicago's opioid epidemic has risen to a deadly new peak historically. Cook County Medical Examiner's Office just reported that a record 2,000 plus Cook County residents died of opioid-related overdoses last year. And it's probably going to get worse because now it's gone from organic to synthetic with fentanyl in the mix. This is Nick Rohde, Executive Director of the Chicago High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. It's a federal task force assembled to combat this, and the fact that it's now added in fentanyl makes it even worse.
Both locally and nationally, we're seeing the complete turnover of opioids as well as other drugs from organic to synthetic.
This from Channel 11, and why? Profits, that's why.
It's cheaper for them. It's more efficient as far as they don't have to worry about growing cycles, and their profit margins are tenfold.
So if you're on the street and you're buying what you think is a stolen or misappropriated opioid that has been prescribed, it's not.
It's very unlikely you're going to buy a real Xanax pill or a real oxycodone. Most of them at this point that you're buying on the street illicitly are going to end up being fentanyl.
Just 3 clips of many included in his piece. Paris Schutz joins us now, WTTW Chicago Tonight co-anchor, political correspondent, moderator of the Weekend Review. Paris, welcome back. Thanks so much. This was a long report and a startling report and quite a depressing report.
It's quite, thanks, John. Thanks for having me. It's quite startling when you think of the fact that we've been talking about the opioid epidemic for many years, and what Chicagoans may not know is it's worse now than ever. As you said, and you played the clips there, what's changed is that, 10, 15 years ago on the street, people might be going to buy heroin, which is a very deadly and addictive drug in and of itself. And that has changed completely now in the last 10, 15 years. What they're buying is a synthetic, something that was made in a lab, not something that was grown. And most likely it's fentanyl. And to put that into perspective, so in 2015, according to the medical examiner, there were 150 overdose deaths in Cook County attributable to fentanyl. That number is now 1,825. So that has skyrocketed. And again, it's because that's what's on the market now. It's fentanyl, and it's variations of fentanyl that were, like I said, cooked up in labs. Sometimes there's other drugs like this animal tranquilizer, xylazine mixed in. The thing is, it's deadly. You don't know what you're getting. You're likely going to die at some point if you keep using it.
I noticed I didn't pull the audio from your report. I urge all of my listeners to go to the website and your website and look at the piece, because I really felt for the 3 addicts that you interviewed at the Haymarket Center, especially the Des Plaines native, this young guy, Tomas. I'm not going to use his last name, but terrible stories. And as I'm watching you interview these 3, I can only think that recidivism is going to be, happening here, because these guys look like they're in the grip of, any number of opioids.
And they were very brave to tell their stories, and I appreciate you talking about them. And yes, and they're very resolved right now, but we know that it's still going to be an uphill battle. I talked to some of their treatment providers. This is going to be tough. I mean, they're not out of the woods yet. And Tomas was addicted to fentanyl. This is his second round. And the thing is, some of the older patients we interviewed, they started on heroin, but they kept buying on the street. So either known or unbeknownst to them, what they were ingesting switched from being heroin to being fentanyl and being these, synthetic drugs, which are more deadly. And here's one other kind of interesting, and this was a fact from the medical examiner's office. The number one age group impacted was 50 to 59. That was 27% of the OD deaths last year. And the reason I'm told is because they're most likely to use alone. And so when you're alone, you OD. Another fact I didn't include in this was the Chicago Fire Department administered 11,000 doses of Narcan last year. So that's the agent that reverses the overdose. So that means that those 11,000 people might have died otherwise, and that overdose tally might be orders of magnitude higher than what's being reported right now. So the younger people, they might OD, but there's someone with them. They can call the ambulance, or they administer Narcan, and maybe they have a better chance of surviving. But another important point here is, it's affecting everybody. The person that's been using on the West Side for 30 years, it's addicted. But then the kid from the suburb that's coming in and he thinks he's going to buy ecstasy and go to the club, there's a good chance that person's buying fentanyl, and there's a good chance it's deadly.
Or Paris Schutz here from Channel 11. You should watch this online or on the show. The suburban kid that comes in and thinks he's buying OxyContin because, gosh, it's in the OxyContin bottle. There's the OxyContin label. As the Fed said in your piece, it's not. The labels are probably counterfeit or old bottles or what have you. And then if it's fentanyl, you're dead before you hit the ground.
If it's fentanyl, and what they said was the equivalent of just a couple grains of salt can kill you and can be deadly. And then the other thing that sort of a Cook County toxicologist told us was that what's happening now is because these drugs are being mixed with non-opioids too. Like we said, this animal tranquilizer, xylazine, the Narcan doesn't have as good a chance of working. So you might get the Narcan and then you don't get revived because it wasn't just that opioid that's in there. It's this toxic stew. And like he said, it's because the cartels realize that they cut all these production costs by not having to grow, stuff in Afghanistan or China or wherever it's being grown. They just cook these raw materials in a lab. They don't care how deadly they are. It's much cheaper, cut out the middleman, and they get it to the folks that sell it on the street.
Did you get any response from the city or the county regarding this report?
Well, I did. I called the county to be able to talk to the county's toxicologist. And look, they know that this has been a crisis forever. I mean, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle has been ringing the bell on it. This is not a secret to anybody, in the know and in power. I think it's surprising to folks. We first started hearing about fentanyl maybe 10, 12 years ago as being cut into heroin. The difference now is almost none of this stuff is actual heroin. It's all fentanyl. So I think the average Chicagoan might be surprised to learn that, the opioid epidemic, it has not gone away. It's still here. It's getting worse. And then the Haymarket CEO basically said to us, it's going to keep happening no matter what drugs are being sold on the street because most people, especially low income, they just don't have this access to treatment. By the way, the two of the three recovering addicts that we interviewed were homeless, and they were diverted here from jail.
Yeah.
They had done multiple stints in jail, and finally, through there are programs in Cook County Jail, they got diverted to the treatment center, and that's where they're living now, too.
Alicia, the woman that you interviewed, she had a line here that really resonated with me, and I was going to pull the audio, but I feel exploitive just playing the audio on the radio without being able to see her. I don't know if that resonates with you,
sure.
but I would feel like you kind of making fun of the way she. I think that I would feel manipulative or exploitive just playing it here on this station, but it works on yours on TV. But she said, I was panhandling, I was selling drugs, I was prostituting, and this is what really resonated with me. You do whatever you have to. When the drug says come, you go.
I mean, I don't think I've ever heard it more succinct than that. And again, kudos to Alicia for wanting to tell the story, wanting to be as open about it as possible. And she, by the way, had been homeless on and off for the last 20, 25 years. And this is a common story. I mean, because you need to buy more of the drug to get that same high, to chase that dragon. And so you're spending all of your money more and more and more, and you do what you can. And that's why you see a lot of drug users also become drug dealers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, obviously you have to prosecute drug dealers, but what's happening is drug dealers tend to be drug users too, and they're just getting thrown in jail. And then they come out and they start using, and the whole cycle repeats. And that's why this is sort of this conundrum that it's not going to improve until there's some kind of discussion in terms of policy here and how people get treatment.
Well, it was a very impressive piece. What was it, 8 or 9 minutes long? I mean, it's long.
It was about 5.5 minutes. These days in TV news, that's an eternity.
It was.
You know, but I appreciate you taking an interest in it. And I want to keep I'm going to keep following these three. You know, I do recommend, like you said, people go watch the story to learn about these three individuals who were very brave to come forward and tell their story. I'm going to keep following them. And like we said, Thomas, the guy you mentioned, you know, he's just weeks into he relapsed. He's weeks into rehab again from fentanyl. And, you know, we're going to follow up. And this is a battle. I mean, it's a battle for their life, obviously.
He looks like he weighs about 85 pounds. The guy needs some meals.
And you know, Haymarket Center, it's an interesting place. It's a nonprofit, and you just go there and live while you're getting treated, and you get fed and all that, and try to figure out how to put a life back together with this, you know, with this demon hanging over.
Dragon. You said the dragon. Chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Paris Schutz, thanks so much for popping on Friday afternoon. We'll watch tonight, Chicago tonight, and have a great weekend. All
right, you too, John. Always a pleasure. Take care.
This is John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
All right, driving the news of the day out of D.C. is the fact that the judge overseeing the January 6th case against Trump, not to be confused with the document case, that's Florida, not to be confused with Stormy Daniels, that's New York, and Georgia's still to come. We're talking about the January 6th case. So the judge today, long hearing, said yes, Trump does have a right to free speech, but it's not absolute. Heard arguments this morning. Our next guest was there watching this go down and has some analysis for us now. For ABC News in D.C., we welcome back to WL, Steve Portnoy. Well, Steve, you've had a chance to still this. What's the judge's thinking on the First Amendment?
Well, look, this was really a remarkable insight into how Judge Tanya Chutkin is going to run this case here in Washington, D.C. This has to do with the January 6th allegation that the former president conspired to subvert the will of the people and overturn American democracy. Today, she made the point repeatedly that Donald Trump may be a candidate for office, but he's also a defendant in a criminal case, and he's going to have to, in her words, yield to the orderly administration of justice. Now, this hearing today was about a protective order, which is, you and I speak, has just been issued, which in some respects acknowledges the defense position, but really does restrict the former president from talking about grand jury testimony, and that really is important here. She made a point of noting that is the normal course of business in criminal cases, that there is sensitive grand jury material that is turned over to the defense as the normal part of discovery, but that there are often restrictions put on a defendant to prevent that defendant who has access to this prosecution material from airing it publicly, and that's what's going to happen in this case. And she said that the defendant is going to have to recognize that his speech in this regard is restrained. Now, overall, she did acknowledge the fact that, look, Donald Trump is not like your typical criminal defendant. He is, she basically said, his day job is going out there and trying to convince the public why he should be elected to office. But she warned him repeatedly through his attorneys, he wasn't present in the courtroom, that he has to be careful not to make inflammatory statements. She says she's going to be watching and scrutinizing. She says that she's most worried, as the prosecution is, about witness intimidation, that the witness security and witness safety is of importance to the court, and she warned against a carnival atmosphere around the trial, and she said that if Trump says or does anything that violates the orderly administration of justice, he might just wind up running afoul of his conditions of release.
Wow. Stephen, did she mention specifically Trump's posting, if you go after me, I'm coming after you?
She skirted it. She spoke of the fact that in recent filings from the prosecution and the defense, there's been conversation about it, but she said because it wasn't the subject of today's hearing, she didn't dive into it. But she sort of broadly said that, the defendant is going to have to comport himself in a way that respects the fact that he is a defendant, and that she kept referring to this phrase, the orderly administration of justice is what she's going to be focused on. She said she's not going to allow politics to get in the way of her decision-making. But the fact is that she's presiding over a criminal case here, and she insists that the integrity of the judicial system and the integrity of her courtroom be maintained, and she's charged with maintaining it. So by the end of the hearing, which lasted an hour and 45 minutes, she essentially read from prepared remarks or things that she intended to say, where she really went into it. She quoted from a historic Supreme Court precedent about not trying the case in radio or in newspapers, but instead in the court of law. And she said she would urge the defense attorneys for Donald Trump to make it clear to their client that he has to yield in his public statements to the orderly administration of justice. How that will actually manifest and what it actually means is for another day.
One final question, so let me just get this right. Former VP Pence was at the Iowa State Fair, and he's being harassed by people who are yelling at him he's a traitor and what have you. If Trump tells people to, kind of harass Pence, that he could wind up sideways with this judge, couldn't he?
Well, look, I mean, it's been said that Mike Pence is going to be a star witness for the prosecution. The defense attorneys said that they expect Mike Pence to be a good witness for them. Bottom line is everyone expects that Mike Pence is going to be called to raise his right hand and testify in the courtroom. So if the former president, even if he's facing off against the former vice president in the Republican nominating contest, the judge made it clear that he has to be very careful not to engage in anything that might be interpreted, even ambiguous statements, she said, could be interpreted as witness intimidation. And she said that's just the way it's going to have to be.
Great analysis. Thank you. We are in uncharted waters. I'm glad we can call on you. Steven Portnoy, thank you. Have a terrific weekend.
You too. Thanks.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
But let's start talking with our colleague and the man who's forgotten more about Chicago politics than the rest of us will ever know, Bill Cameron. He's a host of Take One on WLS, and his guest this week is Arnie Duncan. It airs Saturday at 4 o'clock on the Big 89, and I believe that the interview may already be posted this afternoon at WLSAM.com. Bill, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Any news made from Arnie Duncan today?
Well, he thinks the next election in 24 may be our last if Trump gets back in, which he thinks is a distinct possibility.
Well, the system worked last time, even after the election with all those 60 lawsuits, with Georgia, with Arizona, with Michigan. It held on January 6th. I don't want people to be so pessimistic about it.
Well, he is, because of no labels, threatening to put up a third candidate, and Cornel West, maybe deducting from the black vote. It's scary to him.
Well, you might lose the election. I think that's a distinct possibility, like he thinks, and I think you might think too. But I don't think that's the end of a representative republic. I think that's a bit hysterical.
He thinks that Trump is such an authoritarian, he'd try to take it even further next time and not have any more elections.
Well, I'm not that pessimistic. I'm not. I realize, again, we have it's not a perfect system of government, but it does seem to hold. We have a lot to work on, and I don't know how to reform the things that seem to be off limits as far as reform. Primarily the Supreme Court, but these guys aren't answerable to the executive nor the legislative branch. That's how the founders wanted it. I don't see that's a very heavy lift to get that changed. I don't know who I'd want to oversee the Supreme Court anyway, so I think we just have to take the bad with the good sometimes and play through.
Yeah, he may be alarmist because he wants to get the Democrat turnout way up.
Does Arnie Duncan have political aspirations?
Well, he thought about running for mayor, decided against it so he could continue his crusade to give alternatives to young black men, alternatives from the gangs, and he's reporting some progress in that, but it's a long, slow clog.
So he's working charitably here in the city, and that's a job. It's not just a charity, obviously. He's a terrific basketball player. He used to play with Obama. Who do you think would win one-on-one, Alexi Giannoulias or Arnie Duncan?
Good question. Judging from Alexi's latest photos, I'd go with Alexi.
Who do you think's going to win, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk?
Who cares?
I'm with you on that one. All right, this is we were going back and forth between what Brandon Johnson said. He got upset at the press corps. This is a week ago, this Wednesday, I think so, a better part of a week ago, when somebody asked about one of the disturbances we had, the more recent one down on Roosevelt Road, and he said a reporter used the term mob action, and the mayor pushed back on that, saying, no, it's called a teen trend. We must speak of it in the proper term, lest we stigmatize a group of young youth. And, Catanzara came out with his Facebook posting on that and went back and forth and said, no, it's most definitely a mob action. This is a loaded question. If you just want to pass, you can pass. But when you first started as a reporter, how would the Chicago Police Department at that time handled a teen trend and or a mob action?
Well, I'm immediately thinking of Jim Rochford, who was police superintendent during the 68 convention disorders. Cops then would have cracked heads, might even have cracked the head of a reporter trying to cover it. And if that name sounds familiar, Jim Rochford's the late father, of the Supreme Court Justice Elizabeth Rochford, who wrote today's decision upholding the assault weapons ban in Illinois.
I did not know that. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I thought she was from Rockford. So was he a Chicagoan and she wound up out in Rockford, or do we know?
Lake County.
Okay. Who was the best, most effective Chicago Police Department superintendent that you remember?
Oh, I'd have to go with the one who served the longest. This is a dead-end 5-year job because you make so many enemies. But one of Daley's, who used to be on, a executive security team for mayors, Terry Hillard, lasted 6 years and got a wonderful send-off because the rank and file loved him so much.
Why did he leave?
He just was ready to retire and go into the private security business.
Okay, so Sunday, my understanding is Brandon Johnson has to make his decision. It's been narrowed down to 3, but I know he can refuse all 3. I won't take time to profile the 3. In your mind, Bill Cameron, would an insider from the Chicago Police Department be a better choice at this juncture?
In this current climate, yes, because the rank and file and the unions just hate out-of-towners who've come in. I mean, we've had a few over the years, then they've never succeeded, except one who came in from L.A. to be here temporarily for Lori Lightfoot before she brought in a guy from Dallas.
Yeah, Charlie Beck, right? Is that his name?
Yes.
Yeah, but he said right at the get-go he wasn't going to stay long.
That's right.
And I read his op-eds too, and I think he has a lot of good ideas. Mm-hmm. I thought, came from New York. Come on, what's it? McCarthy. I thought McCarthy was a very good superintendent, and things were trending the right way when he was our superintendent.
Yeah, you're reminding me how good he was. That's the exception to the rule, and he got thrown under the bus by Rahm.
Yeah. He was on his way to LS that morning when he was called to City Hall to be fired.
Yeah.
He was on his way into our show in those days. Watching the Mapes trial, any surprises for you yet?
No, I guess the lead is I'm not surprised that he has this faulty memory. When asked key questions about the relationship between Madigan and Michael McLean and how they all worked together to shepherd whatever Madigan wanted to go through the House, on key points, he told the FBI and the grand jury that, well, gee, I just don't remember, and that's just not plausible. That's not believable.
I heard Jim Edgar say, I think last week, he said, even when he was governor, he considered Mapes to be the second most powerful man in the state, not after him, after Madigan.
Is that right?
Yeah. I tried to broach that subject with Pat Quinn yesterday on the program, but he didn't want any part of it.
Yeah.
Remind me again, just because it's so funny to me, which Illinois Secretary of State died in his hotel room in Springfield with $800,000 in cash in the closet?
That's the Mayor Daley of Downstate. Now you're tapping my memory.
Sorry.
I'll think of it when I'm not trying so hard.
That's my favorite corruption story in Illinois. Or, no, excuse me, alleged corruption.
Yeah, he died without being prosecuted.
That's back in the days when you used to sign the check to the Illinois Secretary of State personally.
Yes.
Yeah. It was $800,000 in 20s, wasn't it?
That we knew about.
That's just what he kept in Springfield. God knows how much he had stashed someplace else.
Now
Paul Powell.
Now I'm remembering.
Paul Powell. Thank you, guys. Well, Bill, any special plans for this weekend?
No, just going to try to hunker down. And is it going to be real hot again this weekend?
Moderately, not terrible.
Just a summer day, huh?
Enjoy yourself. Thanks so much for your time. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
Take care.
John Howell, Essential Cuts. Check back every weekday for another episode of John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.